continuing with like I said, for hormones, you should know their source, their metabolism, their function, mechanism of action, and their regulation. Function, regulation, and mechanism of action are more important. So gastrin, the source of gastrin is from the enteral part of our stomach. This from the G cells present in the enteral part of our stomach. Structure is, it is polypeptide hormone. Okay. Just like that much. Its metabolism, it is metabolized in kidneys and intestines. Remember, if you can remember the half-life, it is like 2 to 5 minutes. There are different types of gastrin, G34, G17, G14. Right. Now its function. Gastrin basically stimulates the gastric acid stimulation and pepsin stimulation. Alright. And these are basically. Gastric acid pepsin secretion, HCl secretion from parietal cells of the stomach. Gastrin stimulates parietal cells. Gastrin is secreted by G cells. And this hormone acts on the parietal cell of the stomach to secrete HCl. Causes gastric motility, and it also stimulates insulin secretion. Gastrin stimulates insulin secretion and motility. Causes colonic contraction and gastrocolic. It initiates the gastrocolic reflex after a meal. It also stimulates histamine from enterocorphin cells in. As we can see in this diagram, the antrum, the fundus. So D cells secrete somatostatin, which inhibits the G cells, and basically G cells are stimulated via gastrin releasing peptide. Right. H cells stimulate the D cell. Increased H cells stimulate the D cell. This gastrin through circulation comes in our enterochromaffin cells. Chromaffin-like cells will secrete histamine, and our cheek cells and our parietal cells will secrete HCl, and histamine stimulates pepsin secretion Right. This is our parietal cell. Resting phase, tubular vesicles, hydrogen potassium ATPase, right, M3 receptor, H2 receptor, CCKB receptor present over there. Acetylcholine binds to M3, histamine binds to H2, gastrin binds to CCKB receptors and produces calcium and SCAM. Now the mechanism of action. The primary function of gastrin is to stimulate acid secretion. Gastrin acts on gastrin or CCK receptor, CCKB mainly, and activates protein kinase. Control of gastrin, you just need to make this diagram to get full marks for this, not full like here. This food in the stomach causes gastric distension. Products of protein digestion peptides and amino acids, vagal stimulation, non-cholinergic. Right, so products of peptides and amino acids stimulus G cells of the stomach, secretion of gastrin, parietal cell, HCl secretion. HCl secretion further causes acidic duodenum, secretes hormone, high acidic gastro autoregulation, causing negative feedback. And because of this acidic duodenal kind, it causes the secretion of hormones like intestinal hormones like gastrin inhibitory peptide and VIP, then somatostatin, like studied in the diagram. Right, so make this diagram will be good to you. Polycystic iron are secreted from micelle in the mucosa of the upper small intestine. You can see this diagram. CCK from duodenum, from the antrum to the ileum, secreted by cells are secreted. Structure, it is also polypeptide hormone and stuff and stuff. Metabolism, the right half-life is 5 minutes. Similar to the upper one. Now they form from pre-pro CCK to CCK. Dilated two receptor CCKA, CCKA, CCKB can be found in brain. So its function is basically contraction of gallbladder. CCK increases bile release into the intestine through a meal. Basically, CCK causes gallbladder contraction, which releases our bile juice. What does bile juice contain? It contains alkaline material to decrease the acidic content. Right, so it further inhibits gastric acid secretion and inhibits gastric motility. Now, anything that causes secretion of HCl increases motility, whereas anything that causes alkaline medium decreases gastric mobility. Now, for contraction of gallbladder, it leads to the relaxation of sphincter of Oddi that is present in between the pancreatic. This is the bile duct, common bile duct. Then this is our pancreatic duct. This common junction has sphincter of Oddi. Right. Both bile and pancreatic juices enter it. Enterokinase motility of it inhibits the gastric motility, that is in the stomach, whereas causes small intestine motility. And choleric action. CCKA, CCKB. B is present in brain and A is present in gallbladder. It acts using phospholipase C, IP3 and DHE. Elimination excretion. Again, fatty peptides stimulate acid, CCK, bile juice, digestion of protein, fatty acid, positive feedback. Basically, our polycystic iron is stimulated by increasing fatty acid peptides in our iron. Right. Now, GI hormone of secretin family. Secretin has an important. Secretin, one of the most important, is the first hormone to be discovered. It is secreted from S cells, located in the mucosa of the upper part of the small intestine. Same as above, it is a polypeptide hormone. Function is it increases the bicarbonate or pancreatic secretion. It is secreted from pancreatic juice. It helps in both action of CCK as well. Mechanism of action: adenylate cyclase, regulation. Basically, it neutralizes the acid in the duodenum, and that is responsible for its negative failure. Then GIP is basically glucose dependent insulinotropic hormone. It's not gastric inhibitory peptide, but yeah, it's also called gastric inhibitory peptide, but more a proper name for it is glucose dependent insulinotropic hormone. It's also polypeptide. It's used by K cells. We have G cells, I cells, K cells, S cells, right? Gastrin, CCK, secretin, and then our GIP. And remember, from gastric inhibitory peptides like inhibitory gastric secretion motility. Then VIP is vasoactive intestinal peptide. Vasoactive intestinal peptide secreted from mucosal cells of GIP. Causes vasodilation, decrease blood pressure, causes relaxation and everything. Glucagon, ACE, alpha cell, this and this. Coming to the principle of GI secretion and secretion of saliva. Now, GI secretions. If there comes a question of GI secretion, GI secretions occur in three phases: cephalic, gastric, intestinal. Cephalic, like the name suggests, is related to your mouth. Gastric, the stomach. Intestinal, small and large intestine. Now, cephalic mouth is sensory. It's sensory basically from all the from eyes, nose, sight, smell, thought. Emotional states, efferent pathways, vagus, nerve, which activates the neuron of the EMS, the efferent pathway. Vagus nerve, you should remember that. You can be asked why if you look based depends on your luck. Physiological importance. Now first of all we should know whenever vagus nerve is stimulated, it will stimulate every other thing that is connected to, like vagus nerve we know is studied in our sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation of the GI tract. Parasympathetic is related to vagus nerve, right? It's also related to pelvic nerve. Okay, I remember but I always forget. Yeah, I was right, you can believe in me. Yeah, so vagus nerve activates the ENS and influences gastric secretion motility. Now, physiological importance of cephalic phase. Cephalic phase is important for salivary, gastric, and pancreatic bile secretion. Now, cephalic phase is basically responsible for everything. It sort of prepares our body for a good meal and to digest. So how would it prepare it? Gastric secretions increase in the stomach, then also in the intestine, and it's like that. So about 90% of the volume is salivary secretions. Now gastric phase, when food enters stomachs, stimuli that influence GI secretion. Now stimuli that increase our secretion in the stomach is distension, the chemical composition, the breakdown of our food and our pH, and gastric secretion, distension, things that we get. The physiological importance of gastric phase is that it helps in gastric distension. Gastric distension is the primary regulator of your appetite. So it greatly influences and everything, and activates short and long reflexes of the GI tract. Okay, short and long reflexes, we studied it here and then didn't go dive deep into it, but yeah, it's not that difficult. Like long means it goes to the brain, whereas short means it just stays in the intestine. Right. So yeah, so this is our intestinal phase, chyme enter the duodenum and everything, which is CCK, secretin, glucose dependent, insulinotropic, and vasoactive intestinal peptide, everything. Principle of regulation. Now regulation of these phases is neural. Cephalic phase is neural, like gastric and regulated by the hormonal and neural mechanism. Now functions of GI tracts: mixing, protection, then breakdown, digestion, then absorption, protection, appetite regulation. Let's forget about these ones. Yeah, I forgot to tell you that when there is increased gastrin production, it causes hypergastremia, which causes peptic ulcers, which is usually present on the lesser curvature of our stomach, on the stomach inside here, because the mucous lining is very thin there. Now gastric secretion. This is important. This one you should know about it. Mechanism of excessive gastric secretion. We studied gastric secretion. We studied phases of GI secretion, and gastric secretion is about our stomach. Okay, and the diagram we studied in our Ganon. You will draw it over here. Okay, CMP and calcium. Right. Protein kinase, hydrogen, potassium, ATPase. Okay. Secretion it doesn't come usually. Let's just see. This liver one, it doesn't come. Biliary secretion, nah, it doesn't. Then we are left with one chapter that is up there. And then yeah, this malabsorption comes important also. Then yeah, question comes what is the function of bile salt. So yeah, and there are some disease which I'll let you know about this one. I hardly like 2 chapters now, I guess. Then motility is important. This is also important. It's not that important this time around. Basically, this is only the most important chapter right now. Identification applied is important in this one, that's it. In this chapter. While types of intestinal movement might come, then vomiting is important. Gastric emptiness is important. Yeah, we have over it. Can finish this chapter. This will into like 1 hour if you want. But it's okay. I'll take time with you guys. Probably, yeah. Like let's just say this chapter is like very important because peptic ulcer is very important, and yeah, that's the most important. That comes in like every time. So after finishing this unit, we will be heading to reproduction.